My name is Tom and I lead operations at the Institute for Ethical AI in Education. The Institute's aim is to put AI ethics into practice, specifically in the context of education. So for us, there are two fundamental questions that undergird our work. Firstly, how do we apply the principles of AI ethics in the context of education? And secondly, how do we ensure AI in education is used ethically in practice? So from this, it may look like this vlog should focus entirely on the second question, but the case I actually want to make here is that there is a common denominator to answering both of these questions, namely stakeholder engagement. As an introduction to us and our work, the Institute was set up to develop frameworks and mechanisms that would allow learners to benefit optimally from AI in education, whilst also being safeguarded against the risks. And to fulfil this objective, we've been standing on the shoulders of giants. That is to say, we've drawn heavily from the pioneering frameworks on the ethical use of AI in general. And these have provided parameters, but they have not answered all our questions about how AI should be used ethically in the context of education. So we know that there are ethical concerns about the transparency of AI systems, for instance, but we don't yet have clear answers on the educational context in which the benefits of opaque AI systems would outweigh their risks. We know that learners' privacy is paramount. But how exactly do we apply this principle in contexts where information into learners' needs can vastly enhance teaching and learning? And we know that AI systems should respect human autonomy. But where do we draw the line between a helpful, productive nudge and undue levels of manipulation? And how do we increase the capacity of educators and whole education systems without delegating too much control? To answer these questions, we need to engage with stakeholders, and that's anyone with expertise in or anyone who stands to be affected by AI in education. An ethical framework must be imbued with the views and values of those it is aiming to support. By engaging with stakeholders, not only do we address the first question, how do we apply the principles of AI ethics in the context of education, we also create demand for ethical principles to be applied in practice. If stakeholder groups and the public at large have a clear and robust expectation of the ethical principles that should be abided by, there'll be stronger incentives for organisations to develop and to deploy AI in education in an ethical way. That's not to say that the will of the people alone will suffice. There may need to be amplified. This voice may need to be amplified with mechanisms such as kite marks, and also spurred on by further awareness campaigns or the teaching of AI ethics as part of formal education and perhaps ethical training for education professionals. And we don't rule out further instruments that may be needed as well, although we would argue that any instruments must instantiate a shared vision of how AI ethics should be put into practice. So in order to work towards a shared vision of how AI ethics can be put into practice in the context of education, the Institute is conducting a series of roundtable events throughout the autumn. We are holding an international conference in November, and we are actively inviting all stakeholders to contribute their perspectives as we work towards our final report, which is due to be published in March 2021. And if you want to have your say as part of that, please do visit our website. So just type in the Institute for Ethical AI in Education at the University of Buckingham. You'll be able to find us and read our recently released report, which actively invites you to have your say so we know what your views and values are.